I'm really excited about the progress that we've made in that direction.
When you see the class of 2007's class gift, I think it speaks to that point.
Would you mind, just for the record, just reviewing that? Because not everyone was at graduation to hear that.
Sure. I'm not probably as familiar as they are, or Mr. McIntosh is, because he's the one that proposed the idea to the students. But there's an organization, it's kiva.org, Kiva.org, and it's an organization that accepts loans of funds to be used for helping out folks in underprivileged countries. And how the money gets repaid, I'm not exactly sure, to be quite honest with you, but the class is making a cash loan, and it will be repaid over time. By whom, I don't know, but I think the idea is probably more important, and that is that they saw more value in something like that than purchasing an additional trophy case for the lobby of the high school. Or not to minimize those contributions, they are wonderful and we appreciate them, but I think as a class to come up with an idea like that speaks to the point you were making, Mr. Jury, and that is the recognition that we have it pretty good, and let's see if we can make it better for somebody else.
Well, I think the interesting thing about that organization is that the kids see what $1,000 can do in a country like Cameroon, or whereas here it couldn't do nearly as much. And I'm familiar with the program, and the person who gets the loan is actually responsible for paying it back. I mean, they give them a long period of time, but they're responsible for paying it back. So it's a great program, and it was a nice gift for the class.
Very nice.
Okay, do we have a motion on accepting the high school improvement plan?
I move to accept the high school improvement plans for the years 2007 through 8 and 2008 through 9.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and John, I think you should probably just stay there.
Okay.
Now we're really going to put you
And we will move to,
Yeah.
yes, I have a lot of questions. We will move to the approval of the high school student parent handbook for 2007-2008, and we've been provided with a number of edits, addenda, etc. for the report. So, John, if you want to.
Okay, thank you. Would you like me to go through the proposals, or do you just want to start with questions? I know you had it in front of you to review. I do have one correction to make on page 2. You want me to just go point by point quickly?
It seems pretty basic to me. I mean,
I agree.
I don't know if you need to go through. I did have some questions, though.
Yeah, I've got a number of issues too.
Why don't you go ahead?
Sure.
Why don't we just go through and, yeah.
Well, do you want me to speak to some of the points first, or how do you want to handle it?
Why don't you briefly summarize?
Some of them are
points?
semantic changes,
right.
I'll skip over those.
Right, yeah.
Okay. The first, on page 6, item J, the first item here is, I'd like to add to a statement to the honor roll being published in the newspaper. And the reason for that is that there could be, although I have not encountered this personally, but there could be a case where a parent may not wish to have their child's name published in the paper for whatever personal reason there may be. So I'd like parents to just be aware that if that's the case and they do not wish the child's name to be printed, that they should notify us by October 1st of the given school year. I think the second one, page 11, is just
Why don't we address each one as you go?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Is there a question?
On that one, I'd like to suggest that on the first line at the end of it, we say the names may be printed in the, let me read the way I think it ought to be. The names of students who meet the qualifications for inclusion on the honor roll may be published quarterly, because will means that you have an obligation to do it, and if there were no newspaper or they started charging you to put the names in, you'd still have the obligation by that statement.
Right, I think that's a good idea.
And the other thing I'd like to suggest, there are people who move into the district in the middle of the year, and rather than put a deadline of October 1st, can I suggest should contact the school administration within 10 business days of receiving this handbook.
That's actually
That might be a little
before
tight
October
because, well, yeah, because if this gets mailed in August, the bulk of the parents would get
That
this
would be
handbook
too
in
soon.
August.
Yeah, this is actually giving them more time.
You recommend any time frame you think is appropriate. But I just wanted to cover people who might not get the book until they moved in.
So how about something like 14 days prior to the conclusion of the given academic term,
If that works for you,
something like that?
that's
Yes.
fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I think the second item is just oh, I know what this is, sometimes parents aren't clear, the handbook isn't clear for parents that even though they may call a child in as absent, sometimes a parent may think that that's all they need to do to excuse that child's absence, so we're just printing it. Most know that they need to still send a note in with the child when they return to school, but this just makes
So
that
you're just
point.
clarifying that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Can I ask about the use of the word excuse?
Mhm.
If somebody sends in a letter, is the absence automatically excused?
Is it automatically excused?
Because this implies that it is, and I don't know if that's the case.
I would say 90% of the
I
time.
can't, I'm trying to think of an example where it's not.
If there are no examples when it's not, then I have no
I can't
problem.
think of one. I mean, it's the same it's been for years, so, you know, it's all it's
I
it's
know,
added. I don't think it's.
because it's
I
an
mean,
item
we
here.
were-
If we get a letter from a parent that says, please excuse Johnny, yesterday we took him to Six Flags, that's still excused.
Still
It's not
excused.
academically something we would like to be excused, but it is, for our records, that is an excused absence.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
Because it's the parent's decision.
because it's the
to keep
parent's
them out of
decision that the child should, Six Flags is more important than documents.
I mean, the note could be something that just reads, please excuse my son or daughter for being absent from school yesterday.
So really, it's just to make sure that you,
That the
But there's a
parent
written-
knows.
that the
there's a
parent
written
knows
piece
that
of
the child was
exactly.
out, and you get that covered, and if the parent knows, then it's an excused absence.
Correct.
Okay.
Then it's fine.
Page 11, the next one,
Oh, I'm sorry, while we're still on that area, if you'll notice paragraph 3 right above it in the handbook,
on page,
on page 11,
I've got them, I know that, of course, we're gonna take out not, and we're gonna take out A.
the will not receive,
Yeah.
Correct.
good,
I've got them in my book in red.
okay. That happened to catch my eye.
It's the same thing up in number 2, actually, too. I'm gonna take out the A before no credit.
Well, that's fine, but there was no not up there, so that it
Correct.
wasn't as
Yep,
important.
that's out. Now, page 11 and 12, it almost goes in reverse order, but basically we are suggesting taking out item 7 in the list on page 11 for the examples of unexcused tardy, because we're proposing a change in the tardy policy
Mhm.
to the longer section on page 2. Basically, we are proposing that students would be given, in a semester, 3, I'm going to say, there's dispensation for 3 tardies each semester. From the first day of school through mid-year examinations, a student could conceivably be tardy with no excuse needed, although the parent would still be notified using our telephone system that the child was tardy that day, but the follow-up would not be as it has been in the past. We believe that we have a number of students that are tardy to school with the same excuse. I mean, it could conceivably be 60 or 70 times in a year. You know, for being 2 minutes late, we're asking that parent to write a note for that child. And I just want to stop for a second and say that this policy, like most policies in the handbook, are written for a very small population of students or a small number of families. This is one of those. Equally, we have a student that may never be tardy to school, and that one time they're late, he or she is late, they get an automatic detention under the current policy. We don't think that that's a good thing. We're saying essentially under this proposal that you would have 3 freebies, for lack of a better word. Parent would still be notified, but after 3, there would be administrative intervention on 5. I do want to make the change, though, in the second line, it should be 5 minutes, not 15 minutes. That's consistent with the policy as it has been.
So now do they need a note?
No.
for being tardy? They don't now, and they still won't need a note?
Correct.
By now, you mean Currently now, or
Currently
now
now,
under the proposal?
this
Under-
current year,
Oh,
Yes,
yes, they
they
do.
do.
they do need a note.
Currently. We have situations, I'm sorry to say, where, given that item 7 on page 11, where these are the reasons for an unexcused tardy, we could have a student late at 7:32, 7:33, 2 or 3 minutes late in the morning, with the note, please excuse my daughter for being tardy, she was not feeling well this morning. And I could get that same note for that same student tomorrow, the next day, the next day, the next day, and there's never any follow-up with it, other than what we might do administratively with speaking to the child, calling the parent, but that student essentially has, I think we're putting parents in a situation where they're having to create this excuse to
Did they
get their
change the
child
date?
out of the detention.
Did we change the date?
It's a new note.
Oh, all right.
And we collect the notes and keep the notes. Mrs. Lucci has drawfuls of notes at the end of the school year,
We-
literally.
We have 1 or 2 students who use Xerox form notes.
But there is, you know, if a student has an occasion, you know, there are issues where maybe the car doesn't start. Or you know, we're saying to you that you could have 3 of those in the half year, and we'll start you fresh come the end of January, beginning of February. But I think the key too is we will still be notifying parents that even though the child, you know, if the child comes in at 7:34, they're gonna get a phone call later in the morning. The parent will say, you know, recorded my lovely voice on the recorder saying, calling to alert you that your child has been tardy to school today, you know, something to that effect.
So they're not getting a freebie in that the parents will still be notified, they just don't have to bring the note in for the first 3.
And there's not a detention.
There's no detention.
Right.
So the parents
And
are still
eliminates, I
notified.
think we're gonna see that eliminate I mean, and we have very good attendance at the high school. I wanna, you know, that point needs to be made. I mean, in the mid-90s, you know, of our daily attendance rate, 93, 94, 95% daily attendance rate, it's very good. The tardies are good if you look at them as who's an excused tardy. But to me, I think there's a certain amount of, I don't know what the word is, but I think there's a certain amount of the system being taken advantage of, so to speak, because we're saying, as long as you have the note, it's a clean slate.
Jerry?
John, I just had a question
Yes.
for clarification, since this has been a pet peeve of mine for 8 years. When you say 5 minutes, anything beyond 5 minutes would then be unexcused?
No, anything beyond 5 minutes is,
In other words, if they have 3 a semester,
they're all gonna
up
be
to
unexcused.
5 minutes.
But it's up to 5 minutes after, that's consistent with the,
I understand, but what if it's beyond 5 minutes, the first 3?
What if they're 7 minutes late?
Or 10 minutes, or 20 minutes, or half an hour late? I mean, is it excused or unexcused?
it's, I don't know, what did we say on that? I'm sorry. I gotta think from,
The way I'm
You can see
reading
how
it, it
these
would be
are gonna-
unexcused
that's my-
without a letter from.
Without a
no, I
note?
think the 5 minutes was intended to mean that they would not receive credit for the class beyond 5
Right,
minutes.
right. I think our intent was that the three excuses, the 3 excused
Yeah, right.
absences,
Untidy, yeah.
that wasn't necessarily limited by the 5 minutes.
Okay, because I'm just curious as to if somebody came in, you know, a half an hour later, said, I'm gonna use up one of my 3.
Yeah,
You know, the way this reads right now, if it says for the first 3 occasions. then
what I
it's
think it
late.
needs, Mr. Venezia, is a sentence in that first paragraph that reads, after 5 minutes, the student will receive no credit for the class.
Okay, they receive no credit for the class, but is it an excused or an unexcused absence if it's beyond 5
There
minutes?
would be, what we're saying is in the first 3, everything is excused, regardless of the time.
It would be excused for detention purposes. The student coming in 15, 20 minutes late for the first time would not face a
Or
detention
the
penalty.
second time or the third time?
Or the second or the third.
Or up to a half an hour late or an hour late?
Would not receive the detention.
Okay, I just.
He
trying
would
to-
still be marked absent for the class
I understand. I
for
understand.
credit counting purposes
Okay.
down the road.
I think that's a loophole or a flaw
Yep,
in that
you're right.
policy that should be addressed. And what I'm getting then is that I'm trying to reconcile the new paragraph 1 with paragraph 3, so that if they have an unexcused tardy,
Mhm.
then paragraph 3 applies.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay? So if they exceed their 3, then paragraph 3 applies. And so that we still extend the penalty to no credit for the class, a detention, and we add on the penalty of not being able to participate in any activities for that day.
After 10 o'clock. That's further in.
Yeah.
That's the one down at the bottom.